Hello and welcome to the top 10 most likely unseen issues for the November 2015 operational case study exam and is our final video in this video series. So before we go through the top 10 issues, first of all we're going to go through the reason for the choices, my basis for the choices. So first of all, this will be based on how much pages or how much material is devoted to it in the pre-scene. Now this could be both from a literal perspective of how much is given, or about how little is given the importance of the issue. For example, if it's a huge topic that is very important and the examiner finds it very important, yet it is not mentioned in the pre-scene at all, it could be that we would be given additional information in the unseen. Now we'll also be looking at it based on the strategic importance. So that SWOT analysis that we did in this strategic analysis video and that we did throughout the pre-scene videos. How important is the topic in relation to what we uncovered in that SWOT? And also how important in general such a topic would be to the company, given what we know about them, given what we know about the management team. And I'll be basing this based on my own experience in the past. I've recorded these videos many times. I've seen many previous exams. I've written many previous mock exams. So I also know how easy it is to write questions on certain subjects. Now, obviously examiners and exam writers are people too, and they are going to write issues that they find easy to write about, that they can write good questions about. Perhaps more likely than they would a question that is very fiddly to construct a decent exam question from. So what do we do? What do you do with these issues in preparation for the exam? So the first point here, and this sort of reiterates a point I mentioned in the very first video, that you should prepare key models in advance, but you should always remember to adapt them for new points in the unseen. Now this is because the unseen will be the actual material that the examiner expects you to use in your questions, in your answers, sorry. Now remember that the pre-scene is just the context, is just the background information that we can perhaps use to shape our answers in the exam, but ultimately the material given in the exam is what the examiner will be assessing you on. Another thing to do is to practice by doing mock exams. Now here at Astranti we often do some research with past students who have perhaps passed or failed their exam and ask them what they feel they could have done more of and what would have better prepared them for the exam. And the one issue that comes out more than any other is they wish they had done more mock exams. Now this is particularly relevant under the new syllabus because the theory is less important than at the OT level. And one of the main reasons why people fail is because they do not know how to approach a case study exam. They often run out of time and they don't answer the questions properly. So this is where using mock exams and practice papers really helps. Another thing you can do is look for real life companies in a similar situation. What are they doing? This helps build a real world context to the information you have been given. So this could be something like looking at how the various individual companies within the Dutch flour group operate at different stages in the production cycle and how do they interact with each other. And that will give you some basis to assess the operations of Flores Rosa. And then obviously your more standard things here, you should learn the advantages and disadvantages of key things. So one thing that was mentioned constantly throughout the pre-scene was the use of machinery. So you could make a list of the advantages of machinery. Perhaps it's quicker, perhaps there's less degree of error. But then you also list the disadvantages, so the ethical implications of getting rid of loyal employees, the increased energy consumption, perhaps the increased or decreased liquidity that you'll have in the short run because of the initial capital outlay for the machines. Just all these general key points that will earn you application marks in the exam. So let's kick off then with the first issue. Now this is the external environment. So this is the current state of play of the environment that Flores Rosa operates in. Now there is several references made to changes in the environment throughout the pre-scene, such as the magazine articles at the back of the pre-scene talking about the increase in automation, the increase in the use of pesticides, the increase in the ethical implications of the use of pesticides, and also the growing trend towards certain different types of flowers. So I've put this here as a risk of changing sociological trends. There was no real mention of people not using roses anymore, but it's something that could, or other different types of flowers, but it's something that could at some point impact the business. Now it's worth noting that there has been an increase in the use of bulb flowering, or a rise in bulb flowering in developed nations, and this is essentially where people buy, or consumers buy, the bulbs and plant them and grow them at home themselves rather than purchasing cut flowers, which is obviously the business in which Flores Rosa operates in. Now one of the things that could impact Flores Rosa is its reliance on exports. It exports into country B, so any changes to the political environment which stifle the ability to export could have a significant impact on operations. Now the model you should be using to help assess this is of course the PESTLE. As we know, that stands for political, economical, social, technological, environmental and legal. So going back up this slide now, we can see where some of these would fit in. For example, risk of sociological trends, that's a social issue. Reliance on exports, perhaps a political issue. Companies operating in developing nations often under the spotlight for environmental and ethical responsibilities. Now, I'll reiterate the story of the Dutch company growing flowers in Kenya and how the company used so much water that it actually drained one of the lakes in the local area. And of course, you often hear about Africa there not being enough clean drinking water or water in general to go around, and so if a company is using what little water resources are left in the nation just to grow flowers to sell back to developed nations, that could cause a backlash. And of course, technological advancements. Now this was mentioned throughout the pre-scene. Constantly made a reference to the fact that some of the manual systems that were being used by Flores Rosa were outdated, that they could have been replaced long ago, and also an entire magazine article is dedicated to the potential benefits of automation. And ultimately it's a key E1 topic, so this is the kind of question that the examiner would put in to help push up the amount of marks allocated to your business, your people and your leadership competencies. So moving on to issue 9 now, this is on income tax. And the reason why I've put income tax in here, you may be looking at it and thinking that's a bit of an odd one. One of the reasons for it is that there has been a mention in the pre-scene of how tax in previous years can be applied, but it has not expressly been mentioned as to how and if it has been applied to the years we are given within the pre-scene. And so one of the other reasons why I've mentioned it is because it is very difficult to fully examine a student's understanding of tax within the OTs. Often you will be asked to calculate certain things or asked for a list of advantages and disadvantages, but to truly explain the impact of tax and the reasons for tax is quite difficult at the OT level. It's also worth noting that tax makes up 25% of the F1 syllabus. This is more than any one other topic. And of course, given the operational case study exam is supposed to be a good mixture of F1, P1 and E1, that means that there is a chance that there will be a tax question within the exam. Another page which really leads me to believe that there will be a question on this was the page entitled Your Role, where it spoke about how you were an assistant accountant. And this is exactly the kind of topic that an assistant accountant might have to do, the kind of thing that an assistant accountant might have to do in their general working day. So how could you use this in the exam? Well, I've put some sections here about how it goes into the statement of financial position, how this figure will be calculated when going into the statement of financial position, and also the under and over provisions and how these are calculated and how these are apportioned year on year. Because of course we were given that section in the pre-scene that spoke about how net losses or gains on tax can be carried over to the next year, which was mentioned in that specific tax rules section, but we were not then given any information about how this possibly had been applied. We were just given the 2013 figures and the 2014 figures. We have no information whether that 2013 figure was the result of a deduction or an addition of extra tax provision. So you could be given some information that perhaps makes that more clear in the exam.